On a forgotten land of Africa, where the sun burned like fire and the nights trembled with hunger, there stood a small hut, not built of bricks or wood, but of mud, dry grass, and patience. Inside that hut, a child opened his eyes to the world. There was no celebration, no lamps were lit, only a mother's trembling breath and a tiny soul who had arrived in life without promises, without certainty. The child was named Kofi. On the day Kofi was born, clouds filled the sky, yet no rain fell. The village elders whispered, "This child has come as a test." Kofi's mother, Amma, sat inside the hut, holding her newborn close to her chest, crying silently. Her tears soaked into the dry earth, as if the land itself was used to sorrow. Outside the hut, hunger waited patiently. Days passed. When Kofi learned to walk, his bare feet burned on hot stones. When he learned to speak, his first word was not mother, but hunger. Amma made the same prayer every day. "O God, let my child be poor if you must, but never let him be heartless." Kofi grew up not with toys, but with his mother's tears, not with bedtime stories, but with the sound of empty pots. One evening, as the sun sank red into the horizon, Kofi asked softly, "Mother, why are we not like the other children?" Amma placed her hand on his head, looked into his eyes and said, "My son, we may be poor, but we are not empty. We carry humanity in our hearts, and one day, that humanity will shame the world." At that moment, Kofi did not fully understand her words, but they sank deep into his soul. Inside that small mud hut, a thought was being born, a thought that would not only change Africa, but challenge the way the entire world sees humanity. Hunger was not new to Kofi. It had lived beside him since birth, sat with him, walked with him, slept outside the mud hut like a silent shadow. But this year hunger became cruel. The rains did not come. The land cracked open like broken skin. Crops failed, wells dried, and the village slowly began to lose its voice. Children stopped laughing, mothers stopped hoping, fathers stared at the ground, as if answers were buried beneath the dust. Inside the hut, Amma measured their remaining grain with shaking hands. Each day the portion grew smaller. Each night the silence grew heavier. One evening, Amma cooked the last handful of maize. The fire was weak, the pot almost empty. She placed the bowl in front of Kofi. He looked at it, then at his mother. "Aren't you eating, mother?" he asked. Amma smiled, a smile made of sacrifice. "I already ate earlier," she lied gently. Kofi nodded, but his heart felt heavy. He had seen the empty pot. He had seen the truth. The next morning, Amma sent Kofi to fetch water from the distant well. On the way, he saw something that froze his steps. A smaller boy, thin as a stick, sat by the road crying softly. His lips were cracked. His eyes were hollow. Kofi approached him. "Why are you crying?" he asked. The boy whispered, "My mother hasn't eaten for 2 days, and neither have I." Kofi's stomach tightened. He remembered the bowl from last night, the last food in their hut. For a moment, hunger screamed inside him. But then, his mother's words echoed in his heart. "Let my child be poor, but never heartless." Kofi reached into his cloth bag and pulled out the small piece of maize bread Amma had saved for him. The boy's eyes widened. Without a word, Kofi placed the bread in the boy's hands and walked away. That night, Kofi lay beside his mother, his stomach empty, but his heart strangely full. Amma noticed his weakness. She touched his forehead. "You didn't eat today," she said quietly. Kofi hesitated, then spoke the truth. Amma closed her eyes. For a moment, Kofi feared he had done wrong. Then she pulled him close and whispered, "My son, today you passed your first test." Outside, the wind moved through the dry trees. Inside the hut, a child learned that hunger could break the body, but kindness could build the soul. And somewhere in the silence, destiny took notice. The village was unusually crowded that morning. Dust rose as unfamiliar vehicles rolled in, white, clean, and loud. People whispered. Children stared. Hope, long forgotten, quietly returned. An aid organization had arrived. Boxes of food were stacked near the center of the village. For many, it felt like a miracle. For others, it felt like a test. A line formed quickly. Thin bodies stood under the burning sun, each person holding fear in one hand and hope in the other. Amma sent Kofi to stand in line. "Be patient," she told him, "and remember who you are." Kofi nodded. Hours passed. The sun climbed higher. Children fainted. Mothers prayed silently. At the front of the line stood a tall foreign man, his skin pale, his eyes observant. His name was Daniel. He had seen poverty before, but never this quiet. When it was Kofi's turn, Daniel handed him a food package. Rice, oil, beans. Kofi held it tightly. Then he heard a cough behind him. He turned. A girl stood there, younger than him, her legs shaking, her face covered in dust and hunger. She had collapsed earlier and lost her place in line. The guards looked away. The rules were clear. Kofi's heart began to pound. This food meant survival. For him, for his mother. For a moment the world went silent. Then he remembered the road, the crying boy, the bread. Slowly Kofi turned back to Daniel. He held out the package. Please, Kofi said softly, give this to her. Daniel frowned. Why? He asked. You waited like everyone else. Kofi swallowed. Because hunger feels the same, but kindness doesn't come to everyone. The line froze. Daniel looked at the girl, then at Kofi. Something broke inside him. He took a deep breath and waved to his team. Give her a package, he said, and give him another. The guards hesitated, then obeyed. The crowd murmured. Some cried, some smiled. Amma, watching from afar, covered her mouth with her hand. Tears streamed down her face. That evening, Daniel asked about the boy. Who is he? He asked a local elder. He is the child from the mud hut. The elder replied, poor but raised with a full heart. Daniel looked toward the huts, his eyes resting on one small broken shelter. He didn't know it yet, but in that moment, his life had changed, because sometimes the world doesn't change through power, but through the quiet courage of a hungry child. That night, the village slept under a sky heavy with stars. But inside one mud hut, sleep refused to come. Amma sat beside Kofi, watching his chest rise and fall. Her heart was proud, yet afraid. Kindness had always protected them, but kindness also made people visible. The next morning, the white vehicle returned. Dust lifted again. Whispers followed. This time, the foreign man stepped out alone. Daniel, he walked slowly, carefully, as if the land itself deserved respect. His shoes stopped in front of Amma's hut. Amma stood unsure. Good morning, Daniel said gently. I'm looking for the boy from yesterday. Kofi stepped forward. Daniel knelt to his level. Why did you give your food away? He asked. Kofi looked at his mother, then back at Daniel. My mother says, Kofi replied, that when you close your eyes to others, you become poor inside. Daniel felt his throat tighten. He had grown up with abundance, food, education, choices, yet no one had ever taught him that lesson so simply. I want to help you, Daniel said. Not with food alone, with a future. Amma's hands trembled. What does that mean? She asked. Daniel explained slowly. A school in the nearby town. A sponsor. Books. Safety. A path out of the dust. Amma listened silently. When Daniel finished, she looked at Kofi. Her eyes filled. He is all I have, she said. If he leaves, my heart leaves with him. Daniel nodded. I promise, he said softly. I will protect both. That night, Amma prayed longer than ever before. In the morning, she tied a small cloth around Kofi's wrist. For remembrance, she said, so you never forget where you come from. The journey to school was long. Kofi had never seen so many buildings, so many people, so many books. At night, he cried quietly, missing his mother, missing the hut, missing the silence. But every time he felt weak, he remembered hunger. He remembered the bread. He remembered the girl in line. Years passed. Kofi grew taller, stronger, wiser. He studied harder than anyone, not for success, but for meaning. Daniel watched from a distance, amazed, because doors do not open often in places like these. But when they do, they change everything. And somewhere in a quiet village, a mud hut stood empty, waiting for the day its story would be told to the world. The first time Kofi stood in front of a classroom, his hands were shaking, not from fear, but from memory. The walls were clean. The floor was solid. The desks were full of children who had never known hunger. Yet inside Kofi, the dust of his village still lived. His teacher asked him to speak. Tell us where you are from. The room grew quiet. Kofi swallowed. I come from a mud hut, he said, where hunger was my neighbor and silence was my teacher. Some students looked away. Others stared. Kofi continued. My mother taught me one thing, that a full heart is more important than a full stomach. That day, something changed. Kofi stopped being invisible. Years passed. Kofi's voice grew stronger, his words sharper, his purpose clearer. He began speaking, not just in classrooms, but in meetings, gatherings, small events. He spoke about hunger without shame, about poverty without apology, about Africa without begging. Daniel often sat in the back listening. One evening, Daniel approached him. "They want you to speak," he said. "Not here, but in the city." The stage was large. The lights were blinding. The audience was powerful. Kofi stood behind the curtain, breathing slowly. He closed his eyes and saw his mother's face, the hut, the empty pot. He walked onto the stage. "I was born in a place," Kofi began, "where the world never looks." The room stilled. "I did not escape poverty because I was special," he continued. "I escaped because someone saw my humanity." He told them about the bread, the line, the girl. Some in the audience wiped tears. Others shifted uncomfortably. "Charity feeds the body," Kofi said, "but dignity feeds the soul." When he finished, the room stood in silence, then rose in applause. That night, messages spread. Clips were shared. Voices echoed. A boy from a mud hut was being heard. But Kofi knew this was not the end. It was a responsibility, because a voice that rises must lift others with it. And far away, in a quiet African village, a mother sat by a doorway, listening to the wind, feeling that her son was speaking for more than himself. Years had passed since Kofi left his mud hut. The child who once counted empty bowls now counted achievements, but he never forgot where he began. One morning, Daniel called him. "There's an opportunity," he said. "A summit. Leaders from around the world will be there. They need to hear your story." Kofi agreed, not for fame, not for recognition, but for the voices that had never been heard. When he arrived, the room was massive. Bright lights, endless chairs, microphones that could carry voices across continents. Kofi felt a familiar tightness in his chest. He closed his eyes, remembering the mud hut, the scorching sun, the hunger, the silence. His mother's hands on his tiny head. Her whispered words, "Carry humanity in your heart, and one day it will change the world." He walked onto the stage. The audience leaned forward, all eyes on him. "I come from a place most of you will never see," he began. "From a mud hut in Africa, where hunger was my first teacher, and compassion was my only luxury." He spoke of his village, of his mother, of the girl in line, of the first piece of maize bread he shared, of the lessons he had learned. That kindness can be louder than wealth. That dignity can shine even through poverty. He paused. A hush fell over the room. "Sometimes," he said softly, "it takes one small act, one choice to help another, to awaken the humanity in others. A child in a mud hut taught me that, and that lesson can reach the entire world, if we let it." The audience remained silent for a heartbeat. Then applause, tears, whispers. Phones lifted to capture this moment. Kofi stepped off the stage. Daniel met him, eyes glistening. "You did it," he said. "You carried the hut with you, and the world is listening." Back in his village, Ama waited. The wind carried the sound of Kofi's voice. For the first time, the mud hut felt alive again, not with hunger, but with hope. Kofi returned years later. He walked barefoot along the cracked paths, greeted every villager, every child. He rebuilt the old mud hut, not for shelter, but as a symbol. A sign hung on the door. Here began the story that reminded the world that humanity is stronger than any poverty. The hut, humble and broken, had changed lives far beyond its walls. And Kofi, the boy born in silence and hunger, had shown the world that courage, compassion, and a full heart can indeed rewrite history.